a boot drove into an old man's ribs. He folded against wet cobblestones. Another kick came, harder than the first. A wolf-headed cane skittered out of his hand and rolled into the gutter. Two young guards stood over him, laughing. One spat on his coat. The other tore the silver chain from his neck and pocketed it without looking down. The old man did not cry out. He did not lift his head. He just bled quietly into a puddle by his own castle wall. Inside the great hall, 4 heirs sat at a long table, eating venison off silver plates. None of them knew. None of them would know for 3 more nights. The old man on the stones was their father. He was Alpha King Voren Hale. What would a king do when even his own blood would not kneel for him? Stay with me on this one. Voren Hale had ruled the Hale Pack for 83 years. He was old now. Older than any alpha had a right to be. His hair had gone the color of wood smoke. His joints clicked when he stood. The wolf inside him still answered when he called. But it answered slow. And lately it had been answering tired. 83 years on the throne meant a lot of things. It meant he had buried 2 wives. It meant he had outlived every general he ever rode to war with. And it meant he had 4 grown children who had been waiting, in their own quiet ways, for him to die. He knew this. A king always knows. What he did not know was which one of them was waiting hardest. Now here's the thing about an old alpha. The pack feels his strength the way a forest feels weather. When he is strong, the cubs sleep deep. When he weakens, the wolves get restless. And Voren had been weakening for a year. He felt it in the hush of the corridors. He felt it in the way his stewards looked just past his shoulder when they spoke. The pack already half believed he was a ghost. So when the seer came to him, he was not surprised by the message. He was only surprised by how flat it landed in his chest. The seer was a thin woman with pale eyes who lived in a tower above the sea. Voren went to her alone. He walked up the steps with his wolf-headed cane. He did not announce himself. She knew anyway. She said, "One of your blood already plans your death." He sat down across from her. He waited. She said, "And one of them already loves you in a way that has nothing to do with what you can give them." Both things are true. You will not see either with your eyes. You will only see them through hunger. Voren asked which child planned his death. The seer would not say. She told him the seeing did not work that way. She told him the only way to know was to make himself small. To go among them as a man with nothing to offer. As a man not even worth a kind look. Voren had been a king for 83 years. He had not been a man with nothing for longer than he could remember. He left the tower. He walked the cliff path home. He thought about it for 3 days. On the 4th day, he made his decision. There is an old magic in the Hale line. It is called shadow weave. It does not make you invisible. It makes you forgettable. It dampens scent. It softens aura. It turns an alpha king into something the eye slides off. A stooped old man. A beggar. Nothing. Voren had not used the shadow weave since he was a young prince running missions across the border. He pulled the small bone amulet from a locked drawer in his chamber. He whispered the words his grandmother had taught him. He felt the wolf inside him fold down into a small, quiet shape. He felt his own face become the face of any old man you have ever passed in the street and forgotten in the same breath. He wrapped his alpha staff in old cloth. The wolf-headed cane became a beggar's stick. He left through the servants' gate at dusk. He did not tell his stewards. He did not tell his children. He did not tell his guards. He walked into his own city as a stranger. That is how he ended up on those wet cobblestones. That is how 2 of his own gate guards, men he had personally promoted 3 winters back, came across an old beggar leaning against the wall waiting for the city gates to open. Believe me, they did not see their king. They saw a problem. They saw a man not worth a coin. So they kicked him. So they took the silver chain off his neck. They thought it was stolen because a real beggar would not own silver. So they laughed. And Voren Hale lay in the puddle and did not lift his head, because he had not come to a city to be a king. He had come to find out which of his children was the one the seer had warned him about, and which one, if any, was the one she had promised. He stood up slowly. He picked up his cane out of the gutter. He wiped the blood off his lip with the back of his hand. The two guards were already walking away, sharing the silver chain between them. He let them go. Then he turned toward the great hall, where 4 heirs were eating venison off silver plates. His test had begun. 3 children. 3 nights. That was how he set it up in his own head. He would not seek out Joran first. The seer had said one of them planned his death. He needed to find that one before anything else, because a wolf with a knife behind his back is a wolf you handle first. So he started at the top. The eldest, Aldrich. Crown Prince Aldrich Hale was 36 years old, sharp-jawed, broad in the shoulders, and famous in 3 kingdoms for his temper. He was the son everyone assumed would inherit. He rode through the city every night at sundown, returning from his hunting grounds, passing through the south gate on a black horse. Voren knew this because Voren had built that schedule himself 20 years ago to teach the boy the discipline of routine. Voren waited by the south gate that evening. He leaned on his cane. He looked to anyone passing, like a beggar who had crawled there to die. Aldrich came at sunset, exactly on time. The black horse. The 4 armed riders behind him. The crown prince in his black wool cloak. Voren shuffled forward. He bowed his head. He said in the voice of an old man, "My lord, I served your father in the Eastern War. I am old now. I have not eaten in 3 days. Please, a heel of bread. Anything." Aldrich did not dismount. He looked down at the beggar, the way you look at something stuck to your boot. Then he laughed once, short and sharp. He said, "My father has not fought in an Eastern war in 40 years. You are a liar, old man. And liars do not eat at this gate." He turned to one of his riders. He said 20 lashes. Then leave him in the gutter. If he can crawl, he can crawl. If he cannot, the dogs will take him by morning. The rider dismounted. He pulled out a leather strap. Voren did not run. Voren did not raise his cane. Voren took 20 lashes against his back, leaning on the gate post. He counted them. Each one tore old skin. Each one would have killed a normal man of his age. When it was done, the rider spat on him and remounted. Aldrich had already ridden inside. He had not waited to watch. Voren lay against the gate post and breathed. 1. He pulled himself up after an hour. He cleaned his face in a horse trough. He moved to the merchant quarter, because that was where Myra held her court. Princess Myra Hale was 32. She was the strategist of the family. She did not raise her voice. She did not lose her temper. She ran the kingdom's trade agreements and 3 of its border treaties. She was, in her father's private opinion, the most dangerous of his children. He hoped on the second night that she might also be the kindest. Voren went to her merchant's hall. He asked at the door for the princess by name. He said he had information for her ears alone. A beggar asking for a princess by name was unusual. So she had him brought to back alley behind her hall. She came herself. She was alone except for 2 guards, and she stood in front of him with her arms crossed. She said, "Speak quickly, old man." Voren bowed his head. He said, "My lady." I am hungry. I came to ask for bread. I am sorry I lied at the door. I did not know how else to reach you. Myra's face did not change, but something behind her eyes did. She said, an old beggar walks across the merchant quarter to ask the princess for bread. An old beggar uses my name to get past my door. An old beggar who has clearly been beaten somewhere else tonight. You are not a beggar. You are a spy. Tell me who sent you. Voren said, no one sent me. She said, I will give you 1 gold coin to tell me who sent you. 1 gold coin and your life. Choose. Voren said, no one sent me, my lady. I am only an old man. Myra looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded to her guards. They clubbed him. They left him in the snow at the back of the alley with his cane on top of him. 2. It took him a long time to stand up that night. The shadow weave was holding, but the body underneath was failing. He thought briefly of breaking the spell. He thought of letting the wolf inside him uncoil and walk back to the castle in his real shape. He thought of how good it would feel to be a king again. He did not break the spell. He walked, one hand on his cane, to the Bone Tavern 3 streets down. Because Thuron drank there every night. Prince Thuron Hale was 28. He had been a happy boy. Then he had been a sad teenager. Then he had become a man who did not get out of bed before noon. Voren loved him in a way that was mostly grief. The Bone Tavern was smoky and loud. Thuron sat at a back table, halfway through a bottle. Voren walked up to him slowly. Voren said, my lord. A heel of bread. That is all. Thuron looked up. He blinked at the old man. Then he laughed. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out 3 coppers. He dropped them, one by one, into the slop on the floor between them. He said, pick them up, old man. With your mouth. And then I will tell the bouncer to feed you to the dogs out back. The dogs out back of the Bone Tavern were not dogs. They were 3 wolves the owner kept on chains. Hungry wolves. Half wild. The bouncer threw beggars to them, sometimes for the entertainment of drunk lords. Voren did not pick up the coppers. He turned and walked out. The bouncer followed him out the back door. The bouncer threw him into the dirt yard with the wolves. The wolves came forward, snarling. Voren lifted his head. He let one thin sliver of his old strength leak through the shadow weave. Just enough for the wolves to smell, somewhere underneath the beggar, the king. The wolves stopped. The wolves whimpered. The wolves backed away on their bellies and pressed against the far wall. The bouncer, watching from the door, did not understand. He thought the old man had gotten lucky. He shrugged and went back inside. 3. Voren walked out of the alley behind the Bone Tavern into a snowstorm. He had been beaten 3 nights in a row. He had been whipped. He had been clubbed. He had been thrown to wolves. By his own children. He sat down against a wall in a quiet alley. He pulled his hood up. The snow was falling gently now, almost kind. He closed his eyes. He thought, for the first time, that he might not bother going to Joran at all. He thought maybe Joran is no different. Maybe he is only younger. Maybe I've wasted 3 nights and my own blood for nothing. Maybe my whole house is rotten, and the seer was wrong about there being one who loved me. He almost smiled at that. It would be easier in a way. He could go home now. He could undo the spell. He could walk back through the cliff path to his own bed, name no heir, and let the pack figure it out when he was gone. The test would be over. He pulled his hood tighter. He gripped the cane. He started slowly to stand. A scream ripped through the snow. He turned his head. A young woman was running down the alley toward him. 3 men were behind her with knives. She ran straight at him, because there was nowhere else to run. The alley dead-ended at his back. She tripped over her own cloak 2 paces from him and went down hard on her knees. Her hood fell back. Brown hair, wide eyes, maybe 25 years old. She looked up at the old beggar and she said, "Please." The 3 men stopped at the mouth of the alley. They saw the old man. And then they saw him properly. The middle one said, "It's him. It's the one from the gate." The one on the right said, "Aldrich said all of them." The witnesses. Old man too. Voren understood then what had happened. The wolf-headed cane he carried was no ordinary stick. The shadow weave hid the king, but it could not fully hide the staff. A careful eye, 3 days later, replaying the gate beating in memory, would notice. Aldrich had a careful eye. Aldrich had realized a beggar saw something he should not have seen, and a wolf-headed cane was not a thing a beggar should have, and a beggar with a wolf-headed cane was a loose thread. So Aldrich had hired men to cut the thread. This was no longer a test of love. This was a son trying to murder a witness. This was a son who had already decided, somewhere in his own head, that the throne was his and that anyone who saw too much had to die for it. The seer was right. One of his blood planned his death. And the planning had already started. The 3 men came forward. Voren was bleeding under his coat. He was old. The shadow weave drained him. He could not call the wolf out fully without time and quiet, neither of which he had. The young woman grabbed his sleeve. She pulled him back into a doorway behind them, and she did something that surprised him. She turned a hidden latch and the door opened. She pulled him through it. She bolted it behind them. The 3 men hit the door. The door held. The young woman dragged the old beggar by the arm down a tunnel he did not know existed under his own city. She said, "Quiet. There's another way out." She brought him up through a cellar in a small stone manor at the edge of the merchant quarter. She helped him onto a wooden bench by a fire. She put a blanket over his shoulders. She poured warm broth into a wooden bowl. She put bread in his hand. Then a man came down the stairs. He was maybe 30. Thin, dark hair, tired eyes. He saw the old beggar by his fire, and he did not flinch, and he did not ask questions. He said, "Senna, are you all right?" She said, "3 men. From the merchant alley. They tried to kill him. They tried to kill me because I saw." The young man came across the room. He knelt beside the old beggar. He took the beggar's bleeding hand in his own. He turned it over and looked at the cuts. He said, "I'm going to clean this. It will hurt. I'm sorry." Voren looked at him. The man did not look back at him as a beggar. He looked back at him as a person. There was no calculation in the eyes. Just the slightly distracted concentration of a man trying to do a job correctly. The man washed the cuts with warm water. He bound them with clean linen. He gave the beggar a second bowl of broth. He pulled a footstool over and sat across from him. He said, "I'm sorry about all this. My name is Joran. This is my wife Senna." Voren almost broke then. He almost let the spell drop. But he held it. Joran said, "Forgive me. My head is somewhere else tonight. My father is missing. 3 days now. The pack feels something terrible. I think something has happened to him. I should be out looking." But Senna was bringing flour back from the mill, and these men. "So I will look in the morning." He paused. He looked at the old beggar. He said, "But you are safe here tonight. Eat. Sleep by the fire. We will figure tomorrow out tomorrow." Voren did not say anything for a long time. He held the bread in his hand. He held the warm bowl. He looked at his youngest son, who had no idea that the old beggar bleeding in his kitchen was the missing king he was grieving. Then a fist hit the front door. 3 of them. Joran stood up calmly. He took his sword from above the mantel. He told Senna to stay with the old man. He went to the front door. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next is what every father in the world has wondered in his quietest moments. What does the truth look like when it walks through your own front door without warning? Now stay with me because it walks in. Joran opened the door. 3 men in dark cloaks. Knives drawn. The lead one said, "Hand over the witnesses." Joran said, "There are no witnesses in this house." The lead one looked past Joran and saw the old beggar by the fire. He said, "We saw him come in here." Joran did not turn around. Joran said, "You saw wrong." The lead one stepped forward. What happened next took less than 30 seconds. Joran killed 2 of them in his own doorway. The third turned and ran. Joran did not give chase. He turned back to the dead men in his foyer, and he bent down and he saw, hanging out from under the lead one's collar, a thin silver chain with a small wolf's head pendant. Joran picked it up. He looked at it for a long time. He had made that chain himself, as a gift, for his father's 50th year on the throne. He turned slowly toward the old beggar by his fire. His hands were shaking now. He did not say father, he said old man. Where did you get that cane? Voran did not answer. He did not have to. Senna, standing by the fire, looked at her husband's shaking hands and looked at the silver chain and looked at the old beggar with the wolf-headed cane, and her face went pale. She said, "Joran." He said, "I know." He said, "I know." He walked across the room slowly. He stopped in front of the old beggar. He went down on one knee. He looked up into the old beggar's face. He said, "I do not understand. But I am asking. Father, is that you?" Voran did not answer with words. He reached up and pulled the bone amulet over his head. The shadow weave dropped. It happened the way a mist burns off when the sun comes up. The lines of the old beggar shifted. The stoop straightened. The face firmed. The eyes brightened. The wolf inside him stretched out long and proud, and the room filled with the unmistakable pressure of an alpha king. Joran did not stand up. Joran wept on his knees in his own kitchen. Senna covered her mouth with both hands. Outside the manor, in the snow, every wolf in the city felt it. The pack felt their king again. After 3 nights of absence, the king was back, and the king was angry. Within 10 minutes, Aldrich was at the gate of the manor. He had brought 20 soldiers. He had not yet realized what had happened. He thought the manor held a witness he needed silenced. He was wrong. Myra was on his heels. She had felt the surge of the king's aura from her merchant hall, and she had come, half out of curiosity and half out of fear. Thuron came stumbling out of the Bone Tavern, suddenly very sober, and followed. The 4 heirs of the Hale pack arrived at Joran's door within 15 minutes of each other. Voran walked out of the manor to meet them. Aldrich saw his father standing in the snow, and his face did 3 things in 1 second. Confusion. Then fear. Then the practiced calm of a man who has spent his whole life lying. He said, "Father, thank the moon. We thought you were lost. We have been searching." Voran did not raise his voice. Voran said, "You have been searching." Aldrich said, "Of course." Voran said, 3 nights ago, 2 of your gate guards beat me on the cobblestones. They took my silver chain. They kicked me twice in the ribs. Did your search find them?" Aldrich's mouth moved, but nothing came out. Voran said, 2 nights ago, you sat on a black horse at the south gate. An old beggar asked you for bread. You ordered him whipped 20 times. Did you remember that beggar tonight, when you sent killers after him? Aldrich stepped back. Myra's eyes had gone very wide. Voren turned to her. He said, "Last night, an old beggar came to your merchant hall. He asked for bread. You took him into an alley. You offered him a gold coin to betray a master he did not have. When he gave you nothing, you had your guards club him and leave him in the snow. Do you remember that beggar, daughter?" Myra said nothing. Voren turned to Thuron. He said, "Tonight, a beggar walked into the Bone Tavern. He asked you for a heel of bread. You threw 3 coppers into the slop. You told the bouncer to feed him to the dogs. You laughed." Thuron was already on his knees in the snow. He was already weeping. Voren turned last to Joran. He did not raise his voice. He spoke to him gently. He said, "An old beggar walked into your kitchen tonight. Bleeding. Cold. You did not ask his name. You did not ask his business. You knelt beside him. You washed his hands. You gave him broth. You gave him bread. You told him he was safe. You went out into your own doorway with a sword to defend him from killers, and you killed them, and you came back to your fire, and only then did you understand who you had been feeding." Joran said very quietly, "Yes, father." Voren said, "Good." He turned back to Aldrich. He said, "You hired the men in the doorway tonight. You gave them my chain. You told them to kill any witness to the gate beating, including the old beggar who carried a wolf-headed cane. Because somewhere in your careful little head you realized that staff was not a beggar's stick, and you understood that you had nearly walked past your father in a gutter, and you did not want anyone alive to tell that story. Did you?" Aldrich's hand went to his sword. Aldrich drew his sword. Aldrich charged his father across the snow. Voren spoke one word. It was not loud. It did not need to be. It was the Alpha voice, the voice the Hail line had carried for 10 generations, and it did to Aldrich's body what nothing else in the world could do. Aldrich's legs locked at mid-stride. The sword fell from his hand. He pitched forward and went down hard on his knees in front of his father. The wolf-headed cane came up. It came down once, flat against Aldrich's collarbone. Not killing him, marking him. The bone broke with a clean, dry sound, and Aldrich cried out, and he stayed on his knees. The 20 soldiers behind him, who had felt the Alpha voice and gone to one knee in the snow without thinking about it, did not rise to defend him. They did not even look at him. They looked at their king. Myra had been backing away. She stopped now. There was no exit. Thuron was still weeping in the snow. Voren looked at all 4 of them. He had aged 10 years in 3 nights, and he looked, for the first time in his life, like a man who finally knew the answer to the only question that had ever mattered. Voren did not speak again for a long minute. When he did, his voice was quiet. He said, "I came home 3 days ago to find out which of you would kneel for me when you thought I had nothing. 3 of you would not. 1 of you did, and he did it without knowing he was kneeling." He turned to Aldrich. He said, "You are no longer my son. You are no longer crown prince. You are no longer Aldrich Hale. You will not carry the name. You will not form a pack. You will go to the northern wilds with 1 cloak and 1 knife, and you will live there or die there as nothing. I would have given you a kingdom. You tried to take it from a beggar's body in a gutter. So you will have neither." Aldrich did not look up. He did not say anything. There was nothing to say. Voren turned to Myra. He said, "You will leave the merchant quarter tonight. You will leave the court tonight. You will go to the shrine on the cliff coast, and you will keep it for the rest of your life. You may speak. You will not command. You used your voice to take from a man who had nothing. Your voice is the thing I am taking from you. You will speak, but no one will follow your speaking again. Myra's face was wet now too. She nodded once. She did not protest. She had grown up under Vorin, and she had read enough faces in courts to know when a sentence was final. Vorin turned to Thuron. He said, "You will go to the Eastern Monastery. You will stop drinking. For 10 years you will sweep floors and feed pigs and listen to monks in the morning. If you stay sober for 10 years, you may come home. If you do not, you will not." Thuron on his knees said, "Father." Vorin said, "I love you, son. That is why you are going to the monastery and not to the wilds. Go and become a man I can speak to without grieving." Thuron put his forehead in the snow. Vorin turned to Joran. He held the wolf-headed cane in his hand. He looked at it. He looked at the wolf-head silver, worn smooth by his own grip across 83 years of ruling. He held it out. He said, "This was my father's, and his father's, and so on for 10 generations. I had thought before tonight that I might keep it for a little longer, to see what happened. Now I do not need to see anything else." Joran did not take the cane right away. He said, "Father, I would have fed any old man at my door. I did not feed you because you were the king. I did not even know you were the king. I fed you because my mother, before she died, told me to never let an old man go hungry on my doorstep. That is not love for a king. That is just how I was raised." Vorin said, "Yes." Vorin said, "That is exactly why you will be king. A man who is kind to a stranger, because of what the stranger might give him in return, is not kind. He is a merchant. A man who is kind to a stranger because the stranger is a stranger, with no thought of return, is the only kind of man who should ever be allowed to wear a crown. Take the cane." Joran took the cane. The wolf-head silver did not flash or glow. Magic does not work that way in the Hail line. It simply, quietly, transferred its weight from one hand to another. Vorin looked at Senna. He said, "Daughter, you did not know who I was either. You pulled an old beggar out of a snowstorm. You hid him. You fed him. You are part of why he lived. Thank you." Senna bowed her head. Vorin turned back to all 4 of his children, the 3 who had failed, and the one who had passed without ever knowing he was being tested. He said, "How you behaved when you thought the throne was not watching was the only test that ever counted. There was no other. There never has been. Every king in our line has done some version of this in some quiet way, because it is the only way to know." He took off his crown. He set it on top of the wolf-headed cane in Joran's hand. He said, "I am going for a walk." He turned. He walked past his 3 failed children. He walked out of the manor courtyard. He walked through the snowy streets of his own city, alone, bareheaded, an old man with no title. He walked out of the south gate, past the spot where 2 guards had kicked him in the ribs 3 nights before. He walked into the woods. He found a tree, an old one, and he sat down against it. The snow had stopped. The moon was up. The wolf inside him stretched out, finally, the way a tired dog stretches in front of a fire. He closed his eyes. He had come home to find out which of his children still loved him. He had found his answer in a bowl of broth and a slice of bread, served by hands that had no idea whose hands they were touching. And that, in the end, had been the only test that ever mattered. The old man on the cobblestones, the king in the puddle, the beggar by the fire. All of them him. All of them now finally at rest. Far away, in a stone manor at the edge of a city, a young man with a wolf-headed cane stood in a doorway with his wife at his side, and a pack of wolves felt their new king, and a kingdom that had not known anything was wrong slept on under the snow. The way it should have. The way it now would.